Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Urania Paes.
And today we have a very special guest. It's a wonderful member of our community, Jenner K, and she's here to talk about the Enneagram and recovery. Jenner's done some amazing work bringing together the Enneagram and the 12 steps. And I saw her, she did a presentation with two other people at the recent conference that I saw that was amazing. And she's also written a book called The Enneagram for Recovery that covers a lot of territory in bringing the Enneagram together with different elements of the 12 steps and the recovery process. So welcome, Jenner. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much, Bea and Urania. Good to be with you.
I am so happy you're here, Jenner, because this is such an important theme. Bea and I have been dreaming of having you here. And I am more happy than Bea is because finally it's type 5-2, type 2-1. It's like you are a 5 like me, and now finally I get to be majority here.
Yes, but I am getting to my feelings more and more, so.
Yes, okay, yeah, me too. Yeah, and it's a hard thing that Bea has a lot to teach us about.
Yes, 2 5s on the path. And one of the things we appreciate so much about you, Jenner, is how diligent you are about doing your inner work. And certainly this book that you've created and your story is a big testament to that. So I like to start with just asking you to introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners. Can you say a little bit maybe about yourself, your background, and how you came to the Enneagram, and maybe how you found out you were a type 5?
All right. So I'll say first my number one Enneagram type is 5, but the instinctual sequence is self-pres, sexual, then social. And you can hear differences between me and Urania and other more social. It's amazing. I care so much about these two programs, both the Enneagram and recovery, that it's kind of forced me out of my shell, which is part of the work, part of what I needed to be drawn to. And so how I found the Enneagram, it was almost at the same time. I got into recovery in 1994. There's a great story behind that, but let me just say I was brought to my knees in the way that when ego is cracked, you're ready to try something new. Mm-hmm. And I was a few months into my program, and a friend in the program handed me the Rizzo Hudson book, The Personality Types. Mm-hmm. And it was just perfect for a type 5 because in the back there's this appendix and it cross-references the Enneagram with Karen Horneyes and Freud and Jung and all these great methods or the personality kind of ways of accessing how to be our best self that I was interested in. And the reason why this friend gave it to me is that I was at my 12-step, step 6. And step 6 is where, step 4 is where we take a very fine-grained inventory of our own instincts, sex, security, and social. So that's a one-on-one correspondence with the Enneagram. And then in step 6, it's more of I would say, a global view on what is not working in my life and what continues to not work, and to concede that my own efforts alone will not get me to my best self, that I will need a third force or a higher power, and what those blind spots may be. And so his handing me the personality types was just perfect because I immediately knew I was a type 5. I've never doubted that. I've never had to, re-research it. And I have taken quizzes, but it was just an overall understanding that these people understand both my weaknesses and my strengths. And I dove into it as far as I would go, I live in the Bay Area, so I would go to these Menlo Park or Berkeley kind of Enneagram workshops. And I want to say something very a strong praise for both of you is that I did this from 94 for a good dozen years. And the effect was never lasting. Looking back, it just hit me from my head up. It was just an aha experience of the intellectual type. And it wasn't until I went to the Chestnut Paes Enneagram Academy where we did the body work and we got in touch with feelings that it became transformational. And I knew that's what the Enneagram was really talking about. So I really thank you because it's changed the course of my life.
Wow, thank you so much, Jenner. And we've always seen you as a model, as a student who has engaged with doing your inner work in all the most courageous and best ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say about what led you to recovery? What brought you into that? You said there's a story there. Just checking in case you want to say anything about your story there.
Well, I'm trying to respect the 11th tradition where we don't name the specific program. I'll just say that I drank too much, which I think is pretty revealing in itself, right?
Yeah.
I was telling it to Enneagram friends just this week on when you have asked in our workshops that if we're going to change at a deeper level, our egos have to be cracked open. And I can say that a physical addiction, or they also have process addictions such as gambling, it brought me to my knees where I described it like an astronaut in space without gravity. It was as if I was shaken to the degree where everything I had used up to that point, everything I thought I could rely on, that I was very independent and didn't need other people, all of that was suspended the last time that I hit bottom. Um, and I wanted to make use of that this time. I had hit bottom before, and again, it would just be an intellectual kind of a reckoning. And this last time, it involved my daughter, so that's my heart space, and I had to get sober. I had to change, and I knew from prior experience that this program was spiritual, and it involved asking for help from people. So self-pres 5, that is not a strong suit of mine. But it didn't matter. It did not matter because my life was at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for your sharing and self-disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us what led you to write this book, The Enneagram for Recovery?
Which, by the way, in our description of this episode, you can find a link to buy at Amazon.com, and it's really recommended by B and I.
Thank you. Well, B, I had asked you after, I think, workshop A on, this sounds so familiar to me, this Enneagram and 12 steps. Are there other people in the field who are already in the program? And you said you think so. There are a few. And since then I have found them. But nobody was doing exactly what I had in mind, which was to describe the beauty of the Enneagram. So the short way I phrase it is the 12 steps saved my life, but the Enneagram gave it meaning. It helped give it meaning. And I wanted to be able to, we do a lot of work in the 12 steps. I mean, we turn over our life and our will, and we do this inventory, and we pray and we meditate. But hearing it in different words is so important. I think you've said that some people in the program, they'll get physically sober, whatever that definition could be, and maybe they plateau or get stuck. And some of my friends do, and some of them don't. But the language of the Enneagram just wakes us up. Like, those are my traps, and those are my patterns, and here's the line out. Like, unlike even the other wonderful psychological instruments like Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram offers a way out. And that sounds like drawing me to my higher self. And that's what those two programs have in common, I think.
Yeah, you've said they're both the 12 steps and the Enneagram are both psychological and spiritual,
Yes.
which I think is a really important aspect. I know when I was a psychotherapist, from time to time, I would work with people in recovery, and it was always a big pleasure to work with these people because they were very dedicated to their path and they were walking these steps which were taking them to be doing these very specific focused tasks that were really helping them. I did find, though, like you said, that often if they were able to change their behavior or, stop, the addiction, there was so much underneath that, and often I know many kinds of addictions are ways of coping with overwhelming emotions that often we never get taught how to manage or how to withstand. And that there was often the idea that some people who would do the 12 steps or would go to recovery wouldn't do the underlying work, that now you need to do psychological work. Now that you've stopped the destructive behavior, now you can really have an opening into understanding what's underneath that. Why were you needing a way out of these of these overwhelming feelings? And so, of course, psychotherapy is really good for that. But I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying, is that the Enneagram provides sort of a guide, sort of a pathway. It provides a means of doing this deeper work. And I like the way you put that in terms of the 12 steps save your life, but the Enneagram gave it meaning. So can you tell us more about this integration of the 12 steps, this path of recovery, and the Enneagram?
Just to double back for 1 minute, is the 12 steps does offer looking into our past. It says that alcohol is but a symptom. We have to get down to deeper causes and conditions. And at this point, I have been to tens of thousands of meetings, hearing 250,000 shares perhaps. And the thing that I hear in common, at least in my addiction, is this full flight from reality. And so if we don't turn around and face it, and in such a way as to do it with acceptance, then we're not going to truly root out we might cure the behavior, like you said, but there's still this underlying problem. So what brought me to write the book, or what was the question, please?
What brought you to write the book, and how do you integrate the 12 steps with the Enneagram?
Okay. So I wrote the book to be able to give people in any 12-step recovery group the Enneagram tools. Not everybody had heard of it, and to me it was just an easy fit. And I tried to, like, if you look at the table of contents, I tried to give one-on-one correspondence for things to do per step. Like step 1 is about powerlessness. So it's first admitting that maybe we're locked into a compulsive way of seeing life. And step 2 is maybe there's another way. And that would be looking at our own types, patterns. Step 3 is a real change step. It's turning our life and our will over to the care of a higher power. And so I equated that with do something different. The David Daniels one is actually a longer version of something that's a phrase that's been used in Al-Anon for decades and decades, and that's awareness, acceptance, action. Yes, so that's interesting. I think it was co-evolution, and so the action part of step 3 coincides with let's get going on getting back some of the foundation from our energizing point, from our arrow against type. That's going to fill in these gaps that we've been just struggling to hide from ourselves. And so that chapter is given to energizing point work. And then 4 is where we take a searching and fearless moral inventory. And like I said, it involves looking at it says that our instincts of sex, security, and social are God-given, but we often let them far exceed their intended purpose. So isn't that perfect for saying it nicely? Like, it has a function, how we got to be the way we are. But when we take it too far, we're going to hurt other people. We're going to hurt ourselves.
Has a lot to do with what we talk about, the instinct distortions of the Enneagram, with one becoming dominating, the other one becoming repressed.
And that shows a new idea from the Enneagram that we don't have in the 12-step world, is you've taught us how to bring up the repressed or the third instinct. And I think, Urania, you said maybe the work of the second half of life is a call to actualize the third instinct, which for me is social. And
Mhm.
here I am, I'm trying to be part of the social fabric now, which is a
Yes.
stretch.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Right, right. I really like how you talk about the full flight from reality, because I think that describes both addiction and when we over identify with an Enneagram type and we kind of keep stubbornly holding on to that limited viewpoint to the point where we limit ourselves or we hold ourselves back without realizing or wanting to do it. Because in way we're not facing a larger reality. We may be just seeing things from the point of view of our relatively limited perspective and not realizing how limited it is.
Mhm. And both of your teaching is so balanced as far as seeing the low side and the high side. It comes with a lot of acceptance that I can see how I got to be the way I am, and I want to grow into my fuller self. And you do that balance really well, I think.
So can you explain a little bit more? Because I think people will find it really interesting. It sounds like you use the back arrow, the arrow against, and each Enneagram type has two arrow line connected points. One is kind of what we call the energizing point because it goes back in time. Often it's like taking a step back into our past to understand something about ourselves, often something we had to leave behind or that wasn't accepted. And then the other arrow is a little bit like going into the future. And can you say a little bit more what you relate in the 12 steps to that arrow behind, or the energizing point, as we call it?
I used it in step 3 because it says in our program that that's the first action step. And I would say that that's the first exploration outside of our home type to go out and see what's missing. And then Sandra Mitri calls it the child heart and child soul. And I can see that those are things left over. I was veering toward being a type 8, but my mother already took up the type 8 space. And for other reasons, I can see why I came back to 5. It was safer to me, and that's work that needs to be. I think if we're going to make our best psychological progress, we have to see the faulty foundation and to get stronger in filling that in.
So would that be like exploring more about your childhood, maybe your family of origin, what kinds of things were wounding? Is it that kind of step back, or is it a little bit different than that?
Because I come first from the 12 step, they have a great record for being more of a behavioral science. It says, we don't care why you drank. At this point, you're just not going to drink.
Right.
you know, like you will get more clarity when you come to physical sobriety. And there is something for me who loves to overthink things that it was a great relief to not have to think at the beginning, to just change behavior. And so in the book, I didn't do too much of the deeper diving onto the past yet. I think it got deeper by chapter 8, which I looked at the shadow, because I just want people to see where they are and what they might have left behind and do some of that awareness and then deconstruction work, as you would say, is what do I need to do? For me as a type 5, I need to be making more of an impact in the world as an 8, taking up my space in a body energetic way as an 8. These are things I need to practice. And so it didn't have quite the psychological exploration that the later chapters to later work had.
It makes a lot of sense because it sounds like what you're saying is by taking this step back, Enneagram wise, we kind of ground ourselves
Yes.
in something outside ourselves and at the same time help ourselves to be more clear, to have a different perspective,
Mhm.
and to bring something new into the work that we might do to take a different path forward.
And I think it's a great convincer because people in recovery are generally spiritual seekers and they have been trying, but maybe not in a continual way to try on new behavior. And as I say, that the Enneagram map, it tells you you're on the right road, but you might be over on the bumpy shoulder. And so keep going in type 5, accessing the strengths of type 8 or whatever somebody's energizing point would be. Like, you're on the right track. You might be even feeling too much of the low point, but you're on the right track. Keep going. And I think that's wonderful.
And I just want to make a comment about what you've just said. People in recovery are usually in the path of growth, and that's something that many people don't understand. And that's like addiction, to me, feels like pretty much something that is in lower levels of awareness. But when someone has the will to go for recovery, it takes a lot of awareness and a lot of strength that is more typical of what here at CP we call level 2, at least, in the levels of awareness. And we had some other episodes talking about this. But also sometimes all this process happens because the person is getting confused and more disidentified from ego and more like broken in the inside, just like any true seeker is. So I want to say this just to break the myth that some people who are addicted are necessarily in a lower level of awareness. Sometimes it's even an indication that they are better candidates to do this inner work effort.
Most definitely, I was acting out of the lower level in the years of my addiction, but I was still seeking. It was never going to get anywhere because it wasn't based on reality. And as you've identified, it gives us the good thing about hitting bottom is there's only one way to go. You
Right.
pretty much have to go up if you're going to make it. But also, the 12 steps is quite a spiritual emphasis on ritual. We pray and we meditate and we make amends and we help other people. It has, maybe I can go further into tools going both ways, but it's the Enneagram is complementary. It gives new language. It gives new practices too.
Can you repeat the first 4 steps, and then I have a question about the 4th step, just so people who may not be familiar with the 12 steps have them in mind as we relate them to the Enneagram.
One is that we were powerless over fill in the blank, that our lives have become unmanageable. And if you want, I can go how that could help people in the Enneagram world.
Yes, that would be great.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is admitting that our old ego patterns are limiting and are harmful. We are not living our best self when we're locked into that one way of seeing things and defending them. All right. Step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I like the emphasis on could, like maybe there's another way to live. And so that would be, what about this Enneagram? Is it describing something true for me? Can I use it in a practical way? Is it going to help me in my relationships? It's just the door ever so slightly open. And then step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And that would, like I say, be a moment of change. You don't know quite what you're getting into as far as the spiritual and psychological change, but you've made a decision you're going to go forward with it and give it a try. And so in the Enneagram terms, that would be, joining a real academy such as yours, or some commitment to an ongoing process, not just reading one book and putting it back on the shelf,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
And just can you stop there, because I just want to say some things that really leap out at me that I really love about what you're saying. And that is, so much of the Enneagram work is a kind of waking up out of the trance
Yeah.
of ego or personality. And it just sounds like you're talking about that in such a clear way. And this is sort of like pathway for people to find the way out It's real, like you said, it saves lives. There's this way that people, it's like, sort of like you have to wake up or not, or die sometimes when you're in the grip of an addiction. And so I think I like it because it's acknowledging a greater power is especially, I think, resonant with our approach to the Enneagram, which, Urania really, in a beautiful way, kind of holds the flag for this is a spiritual system. This is a model of transformation. We're not talking about making the ego better or making it a little nicer or more functional. We're talking about you got to realize the ego is not getting you there. It's driving you into a ditch. Now, the tricky thing is, for people who are, say, drinking alcohol, that's a different kind of ditch than someone who's a workaholic who may be getting rewarded for that, but still has an addiction. And so I think I like that there's these first few steps are almost recognizing and having humility of my ego is not going to get me there. I need to surrender to a higher will in a way. And I like the 12 steps too, because even though they're profoundly spiritual, they do have this very practical approach,
Very
of you gotta give it up because you being in your personality or your ego being in charge is not working. And so it's like giving your will, recognizing there's a higher power and submitting to a larger will reminds me of the holy idea of holy will. That ego, when we're in ego, it's a little like playing God. And so when you get to that hitting bottom point, there is this opportunity to wake up out of that. And these steps give you a real practical guide to actually how to do that.
Your two most recent book, the Waking Up, hits the language perfectly because we don't want to be halfway alive, leading a 70% life. It's not just addiction, as you said, to chemicals or process, but our own life that's at stake. So it's every bit as vital.
Yeah, and I like the way this kind of, and I think the experience of so many addicts is it is life and death.
Yeah.
And I think in a way it's like Urania was saying, it's a positive thing because some people who don't fall into an addiction may be asleep their whole lives, and this is almost a way of utilizing, the situation you find yourself in order as a means of waking up.
And I wanted to touch on something. I hope I'm paraphrasing it properly, Urania. Correct me if I'm wrong. You said that if talking about the process Enneagram on the levels of development or awareness, is that if we do the work, we can psychologically get to, I believe you said level 3. But at the shock point, we need something else to get us past that. And that is completely in line with the 12 steps. We need grace.
Right.
We can do
Yes.
Yeah,
that.
we call it point three, not a level, but you're totally right. And that's when we need to receive a third force that is external and coming from a higher level to be pushed beyond those constraints. And I just want to add that our Enneagram type is an addiction,
Yes.
like in the personality level. And the passion of type can be understood as an emotional vice. This is also something that perhaps, using the 12-step approach to the vice of personality could also represent something good.
I find it, this is my own take. I don't know if it's commonly thought that we were given these certain gifts, and like children we want to reverse engineer them and we pound them to death, and we do the same thing but the flip side in an egoic manner, and it destroys the essence or the beauty of it, and we need to clear that away to get back to it.
Yeah, and then we need that step number two, saying there must be something beyond where I am right now.
Yes.
So both on the 12 step and on the Enneagram, we need to start at the very least questioning, is there anything alternative to what I'm living?
Yeah.
Is there anything that it can represent some freedom from those patterns? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Right.
so we stalled at 4. Do you want me to keep going in the steps?
Yeah, and just because I want to say, I think 4 is amazing, the way how connected it is to the instincts.
Mhm.
So can you say that again? Because I think that's incredible.
It says that these instincts are certainly God given and there for a reason, but we often let them far exceed their intended purpose. That's pretty close to the direct quotation there.
Wow.
And that is completely, as we understand the instincts, is they're not. They're not bad, but my only looking at self-pres means I'm living in a pretty small bubble here, and I'm not conscious of the social fabric. I'm not. I'm politically uh, blind. I'm not living my best self, my biggest self, by
yeah.
getting stuck in
And
the
at the same time, self-pressed instinct in its origins and its non-distorted state is the very capacity to receive the biggest gift of all, which is life,
Mhm,
and to take care of it
mhm,
without falling into those silly things that a self-press dominant person can do,
mhm,
and not more silly than a social dominant or a sexual dominant person can do. But yeah, and then there are capacities that comes from a more healthy self-preservation instinct, even the meditation thing or the internalization, going inside. This comes from the self-pressed instinct when healthy, but it goes way beyond where it should go, as you
exactly.
said.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I lead workshops, and I once wanted to flip it to the positive side. And I said, the good thing about being self-pres is I'm very respectful. I don't overtalk people most of the time. I don't wear so much perfume that the person next to me can't breathe. And that having a small bubble is very kind and considerate and respects other people's agency as far as they're living their life up to a point. So
Yes.
each of them has something good to them.
So the step for action or directive is what exactly again
So
in
the,
terms of the instincts?
okay, so the step reads, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And in the program, we take an instinct, we take an inventory of our fear. That sounds like
Uh,
the self-preservation instinct to me.
right.
What is our fear? What is causing it? Is it based on an over-reliance on self? Then the main inventory that most people think of for step 4 is our relationships with others. Do we have a resentment against them? What is our part? If we're seeing a common denominator in all of these different relationships gone awry, the common denominator is me. What is my part? And so that would be, I think, the social instinct. And then the last inventory that we take is a sexual inventory. Have I used people? Have I behaved selfishly without regard to the other person there? So there's the 3 instincts right there.
Wow. And it's about taking inventory.
Yeah.
So it sounds like being really honest with yourself about where you've been and what you've done and how you've been relating to people.
And that segues well into 5 because it says, just in the regular language of the program, we can't be honest to ourselves by ourselves. And so step 5 is admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And again, the challenge for me was to be
Mm.
intimate. We have sponsors, somebody who's farther down the 12-step path than we are. And we sit and we talk, we read over this inventory and we listen to the feedback from our sponsor. And it says, the language in our 12 steps and 12 traditions says, this is a process as old as time. It seems like the human heart needs to confess, to say out loud and have the other person hear us. So
Yeah,
even,
and to do the work together with other
yes,
people, also connect to someone who's a little bit further ahead.
yes.
All of these are things that we also explain in the Enneagram Path for Growth.
Yes. In fact, you said when leaving that we need to be able to give this to somebody else. And when I get to step 12, that sounds a lot like our step 12. So,
Right, right.
yeah. Okay. So that was 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and other human being, exact nature of our wrongs. And then here's the one that I really, I said I got introduced to the Enneagram because of step 6 and 7. And one of our older members said, this is the heart of the program. 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And 7 is humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And those sound kind of redundant. And some people say, why do we have to have, 2 steps that talk about shortcomings and defects? And um, it's not directly written, but the way I understand it, I have a job to sort out and find what my glaring defects are. And I should take whatever action I can think best to do the opposite. But whether any given defect will be removed on that at that time is not up to me. It's up to my higher power.
Yeah, so it's like we can do our best, and still we will need permission and some kind of someone opening the doors for us. And it's something that we really try to explain that is important when we get to higher levels of
Yeah,
awareness
yeah,
on the Enneagram. Otherwise, we think of all of this as being too anthropocentric, like we are making all of this happen and not a higher
yeah.
force.
It would be, for me, it would be way too mechanistic. I love being independent and an individual. But if I could just dial in all of my spiritual awakenings, then I would have no need for a group or for a higher power.
Yeah.
And that is what I need. So,
It's interesting that the 12 steps sort of take some cautious approach to avoid spiritual bypass.
yes, yes,
Sounds like.
yes. In fact, if anything, I would say we are very good at pulling our own covers. And when you hear people talking in the room, it slides in sideways. It doesn't directly point a finger at my ego. You just hear somebody else talking, and you think, "Oh, I've got that too."
Interesting.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah, I love the community aspect of this, and that you need to do this searching moral inventory and then you need to share it with someone else. It's not just keeping it inside, which I don't know how that was for you as a 5,
yeah,
but now you have to tell it to somebody else.
right.
And you have to be open to the feedback that they give you.
Mhm.
And so over and over again, I just think that it's so much based on a kind of path to humility.
Like a perennial wisdom that you two talk about.
Exactly, which I think is at the heart of the Enneagram, that it's an act of humility to say it's not all about me and my ego. And I think the brilliance of these steps is it sort of makes sure that you don't skip. I mean, and sometimes we say that spiritual bypass is about skipping steps
Mhm.
on the path. And it's almost like these steps, doing, and the way that the tradition of doing them in this, of really doing the steps in a serious way, makes sure that people don't skip any steps that will help make them fall back down to this lower level or back into sleep or back into addiction.
Yeah,
Um,
I would
and yeah,
I would just add, you need to share not with just anybody. It's with a friend on the path.
Right, right.
And that is also
Yes.
something we teach a lot all the
yes,
time when we are doing something that is not only difficult but uncommon in the
Right.
sense that it's not the majority who's doing it. Like Enneagram work in a deeper level, then we need to connect to someone else doing it. Otherwise, it becomes too hard and we'll
yes.
feel as if we're the only ones
Right,
because
right.
most people are not doing the
And
same.
I think part of what drives people to addiction and all kinds of ways of coping with pain is feeling alone. And so I like how this is very much it's done in relationship, And I also think there's a parallel in what you're saying about what we talk about in our levels of awareness model and level 2 about regrouping. It's like you've got to hang out with other people who are also walking the steps. You have to hear, you share each other, you share stories, and you have someone that you work with who's farther on the path that supports you and helps you and is someone you can call when you're in trouble. So these things are all, I really appreciate how practical they are about helping people stay on the path.
And here's the thought is that when we go to the larger meetings, maybe there's 20 or 100 people there, we're cautioned to share in a general way. And like I say, it creates an atmosphere of trust, like a safety net, I feel it. But when we sit one-on-one, so that one, the general group sharing might be considered a social construct. And when we sit one-on-one, that is the sexual or the one-on-one where it gets more intimate, is we're accepted by one person. And it says, this is just one person. We're not psychologically trained. We're not therapists. And they may get it wrong, but at least it's going to be real feedback. And again, it's very practical.
Right. And you're being listened to and responded to. And it's really amazing how it speaks to people who come to the recovery who have different dominant instincts, right? And there's something for everyone. There's like being pushed out of your comfort zone as a self-preservation dominant. There's the power of the group for the social dominance, and also these one-on-one relationships that are also a big part of it. So it's almost like it's both. There's some comfort for people who have these dominant instincts, but there's also challenge built in, like there's a natural way that people are encouraged or even pushed to balance their instincts, right? And not just come from one. Because there was one time when I was starting to follow a spiritual path, but I just did it at home by myself and read these things by myself. And I kept thinking I should go to a meditation, I should go to a group meeting. And I didn't. And I kept noticing that as a self-preservation dominant, I sort of stayed in my comfort zone. And so I think there's a way that this program offers something, again, that both supports people like in doing it their dominant way that they may feel like they need to have something to hold on to, but then also nudges you out of your comfort zone to develop more capacity around these other instincts. So it's really beautiful.
And this is such a good conversation because we're coming to a new understanding by talking it out loud right now in life.
Yes.
So who knew? Yeah.
Yes. I've been a little bit familiar with the steps, but not as familiar as you are. And so it's such a gift to hear you talk about them from your lived experience and from bringing them together with the Enneagram. So what about step 8?
Okay. That one is made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And let me jump to step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And 8 sounds like just a half step up to 9. It's just making a list. But to me, the beauty and the psychological depth of it, it's became willing to make amends. In other words, to stop seeing it from our own perspective, to do the shadow work, to see the other person as having a different Enneagram type or different dominant instinct, from having different needs than ours. And I think that's so beautiful. And that's one of the strongest chapters. That's, in fact, one of the main reasons why I wrote the book, was to talk about the shadow work on we're blaming others for stuff that we do not want to see in ourselves. The idea of othering others instead of owning that we have perhaps stepped on the toes of other people. And so I think that step 8 is actually very beautiful, is switching places with another human being.
Yeah, and we do talk about, I mean, when we grow, we need to not only own our parts and start talking way more about those instead of criticizing others or expecting too much from others, But the shadow thing is something we can do as we grow. And I'm not surprised that this is a later step,
Yes.
not one of the beginning ones. And those correspond a little bit more with our next levels of awareness in our CP model.
And at the risk of bringing in a third model and making it a little more complicated, what this is really reminding me is Dante's Divine Comedy, which I've, integrated with brought together with the Enneagram also, because in hell, in Inferno, what characterizes the shades that end up in Inferno for eternity, forever, is exactly these things. They blame other people. They don't take responsibility. And I love this amends is about taking responsibility for the harm we've done and wanting to make it right, which is leading a little bit to what the dividing line between the Inferno, the hell in Dante's Divine Comedy, and Purgatory, which is the second book, and of course the third is Paradise. The dividing line is repentance.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot and we talk about repentance in terms of our levels of awareness model and how we use the Enneagram as a guide for understanding how to move forward on our path of development. That there's a big part of, in addition to humility, which is part of this, there's a part where it's about really seeing the error of our ways without getting excessively self-critical, right? And guilt is a low level of emotion, and we're not talking about that. And I hear that it's not about that in these steps, but it's much more about being able to repent, see the error of our ways, feel sad and sorry about it, and recognize how to do it differently.
And in Dante, we face all the seven deadly sins. We just spend longer in the one that's our particular one. And in our 12 steps and 12 traditions, they have long, long paragraphs on each of the sins and their levels. It says things like, we may be not so gluttonous as to ruin our health, but who of us has not taken our comfort? And it talks about each of the seven deadly sins as well.
Really?
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. And then another correlation. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so 9 I mentioned, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And we've now done it with a mostly open heart, not just a pure, I'm sorry. It's, I see that I harmed you. I see that I let you down. My best intention is to not repeat this action. And it comes from a much more heartfelt place after doing step 8.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So the eights is sort of make a list and sort of reflect on it and own it. And the 9 is actually make the statement,
Yeah.
make the amends, do that direct communication with the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So take action in a kind of way. Don't just think about it, but bring it out into your relationships.
And with an open heart to listen to what their impressions were. It's hard. It's hard work.
But it also sounds like that again helps people get into their heart, whether they're a heart type and maybe they need to get more clear with themselves in their heart, or they're a head type and they need to get more into their heart, or a body type and get more into their heart.
Yeah. 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 All right. 10 was continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. So I like the continued part. That would be David Daniels' what is his adherence one, where we have to keep doing the work.
And I just want to alert people. So Jenner's referring to David Daniels, who was our mentor and one of the pioneering Enneagram teachers in the world. He had these 4 A's, I think it was called.
Yeah, awareness, acceptance, appreciation, which Al-Anon doesn't have, action, and then adherence.
Adherence.
And the keep on keeping on is very good for humans, because we like you say, we have these great expansion experiences and then we like to revert. And it's a reminder, oh no, you still have inventory to do. You still have areas of defect and not right relations with other people.
Yeah, but step 10 also sounds like it's a bit more preventive, so that we don't incur again in the things. And it reminds me the very important competency of self-observation, when we spot what we are doing at the moment and we don't go there,
Right.
and we recover what's called choice,
Yes.
which is something that we can get to when we do inner work.
Uh-huh. And if we've done the major house cleaning already, it's meant to be lighter, like take care, like exactly what you said, preventative. Don't let the psychological gunk build up again. Take care of it in the moment. Go the next day and say you're sorry to somebody you've harmed. And I think that that's very grown up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you said, it's letting people know that it's not a one-shot deal,
Yes.
and same with the Enneagram. It's
Yes.
like you may find your type and have all these insights, but then you need to put that into practice in an ongoing way. You need to be observing yourself and inquiring into habits in order to undo them and staying with that so that you can create change instead of just sort of resting on your laurels or thinking, oh, now I'm done. It's an ongoing process of self development.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
Mhm. And then 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And the reason why it's another 10, 11, and 12, or some people call them the maintenance steps, but I would say they're kind of the refresher course to keep us on the path, like you said, Urania. And um, what I've likened it to is step 3 was such a big, for me, I didn't want to concede centrality to something other than myself. I wanted to rely on my own individual will. So step 3 was hard for me. And the way I liken it is step 11 is another chance. This is where you get closer contact with your spirit. You don't have to do it all at one time. It's just a bare beginning in 3. And 11 is the deepening process of that.
Yeah, I also got that impression that 11 is actually a deepening from 10, because it's like on 10 we are self-observing, and then on 11 we are transcending,
Yes, yeah.
going beyond that.
Good
Does
word.
it make sense to you?
Yeah, good word. Transcending. Good. 11 is, I think, one of the most spiritual steps there is. I spend a good deal of time every day in prayer and meditation and contemplation.
Mhm.
It's beautiful. It's almost like, the earlier steps is realizing there's something, a higher power than me. This is, I shouldn't be playing God when I'm identified with my personality. It doesn't get me anywhere because it's not the truth. And then this is sort of like developing an ongoing relationship to that higher power in doing the things we need to do to can make that connection and have it keep going and feel it in our lives in the ways that we may get helped even in surprising ways on our path.
Yeah, and it also feels like it's no longer just apologizing for a fault or some slip on the path. It's not really like ask for forgiveness for something. It's more like I'll stay in touch with you in meditation and prayer so that I don't go there.
Uh-huh. Right. Transcendent. And also, I noticed the language is that in step 1, we said we're powerless. Well, if that were the end of the story, we might as well just go home and shut the doors. But here it says that we're asking for the knowledge of the higher power's will and the power to carry that out. And the way I interpret that is that I'm a conduit or a channel, is that now I have the will, I have the power that's not mine, but can flow through me. And Urania, our non attachment one, that really sounds like that kind of non attachment to me.
Right. The virtues, the non-attachment being the virtue for type 5,
Yeah.
but also the other virtues are not too different from these.
Yes, yes. They're all, in fact, all of the low side of our fixation is our separation from this cosmic
Right.
blessing and the idea that we are individual but we're not separate. That has been a strong, I got that from both of you and my own meditations. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then the last one, it's having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And what I really like, it's so many of us come in afraid of the God idea or the higher power. And it says, what is a spiritual experience? It's that we are able to do, feel, and believe what we weren't able to do before on our unaided will. Very down to earth, very, look, I can not drink anymore under these social challenging circumstances. I can feel like I'm with people when I'm sitting with them. I don't need the veil down of some substance in my body, and believe it took me hitting bottom to be able to find a higher power and believe. And in Enneagram terms, it's this connection to everything and everyone.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Right. And finding that sense of support and meaning through that connection, not just sort of exercising your own small will.
Right.
And when you can, it's very aligned with the Enneagram in terms of like when we realize that we're over identified with something we're not, it opens the door to realizing all that we are connected to that we don't see when we're stubbornly kind of stuck in our own personality and its lens on reality.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow, very beautiful, Jenner.
Thank you.
It's really, really a beautiful thing. And so it sounds like in the book, you kind of take each chapter and kind of talk about the steps and link them with particular elements of the Enneagram system, kind of like a way we've been talking about, but with even more systematically. Is that right?
Well, what we just talked about, I was trying to bring kind of 12-step ideas to people in the Enneagram world.
Right.
And there in the book, I tried to bring more Enneagram ideas into the 12-step world. Like I think
Ah,
the shadow work is so important for the step 8 that we talked about. And it's just
right.
a matter of emphasis on which direction.
But I do think it's also an opportunity for Enneagram listeners of the Enneagram 2.0 podcast to learn more about the 12 steps.
Mhm.
So, in the other way of what your original intention with the book was.
Right.
They do have
Right.
a book. It's called The 12 Steps for Everyone. And it's written just with that audience in mind. Like we're all addicted to our old ways of being. And that would probably translate better for people out there who don't have a substance or a process addiction.
Right. 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 So, any last thoughts you have for the Enneagram audience on, what from the 12 steps or the path of recovery, what what might help them if they can gain something from this, whether or not they struggle with addiction?
Well, maybe I just want to go sideways just a little and say that lately I've been, like I said at the beginning, I am trying really to get to my feelings more. I feel like that's such a rich, unexplored territory for me. And I heard the idea of codependency. And it's not just Al Anon people with family members. It's do I change my behavior in any way to try to change other people or react for myself. And my pattern is withdrawal. And I would say I'm not codependent, but this withdrawal is a reaction, it's not an action. And so I think we're all have less than ideal relationships. And this might be an interesting entree point for a lot of people out in the Enneagram world is to look at the idea that we can be our best self through applying the balancing of the instincts, getting to our energizing point for our relationships. Does that
Mm.
tie in? Do you think?
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think just the whole idea that, all of us, I mean, almost by definition, being sort of too attached to personality and the patterns and habits, it is a kind of addiction, that everyone suffers from this in some way. And that is sort of part of being in a personality or identified with a personality. And so I think all of what you've said really is relevant to the process of kind of waking up out of that and then very practical steps that you can take in order to move out of that, both in terms of, your mind and what you do and how you feel about yourself and your life and others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I come back from your retreats, our workshops, I have that similar feeling of being suspended, that my ego is not holding me down so much. And I just came back from a vacation where I'm not judgmental for a brief period after. And it's so, you realize what a burden it is to carry all of those heavy ego things around when it's lifted, even if temporarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes. Very glad, very grateful for you,
Thank you.
Jenner, for the work you've been doing with this and for sharing this with us at Enneagram 2.0.
I'm deeply grateful to both. Really.
Thank you so much, Jenner. It's been a big pleasure talking with you, and thank you for writing this book. I think it's going to do a lot of good and really, really be a huge contribution in bringing together these two systems that both have so much in common in terms of helping people transcend and find their way to a higher place and a more fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that does it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast.